Da, da, da. Good morning to Gainsborough Studios. This is the longest This Is Your Life Story ever told. We have Eric with us this morning.
Hello
How
to
are
you,
we?
Mike.
And obviously we've got Bella. We won't be dealing with Bella's life story, but we are going to pick up on Eric's life story, which last time we left, very sadly, you'd had a stillbirthed babe whilst you're up in Norfolk. You had decided to return back into London to your folks' home.
As a result of the stillbirth, that's right.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
You'd done your magic, had produced some interesting results. You did a bit on Robin Hood, riding through the glen with his and all of that jazz. And we're now at the point you, I don't know whether one should say this, but sort of got into bed with a Russian who was into berets. That'd be about right.
Well, I met
Something
this
like
wonderful old person called. He'd been born in 1898, I think. Well,
Right.
1875, something like that.
My grandmother's age.
Yes, and he was a wonderful old man, Russian, and very voluble, and so he was a real entrepreneur, you know, with the old school.
Yeah.
And apparently in the war, of course, he had been in England, and he shipped over from France a lot of old berry-making machines.
Oh, right.
And the government, because they wanted berries, you know, for the forces and everything, they gave him this factory up at Cleator Moor for, I think it was £7.50 a week or something like that.
And where is that?
At Cleator Moor up in Cumbria.
Right. Okay.
And he just, all through the war, he'd supplied berries. So, of
Oh,
course,
right.
at the end of the
Lots
war...
of berries.
Oh, lots of berries. He'd actually made a lot of money, and in fact he owned blocks of flats and all sorts of things. But I mean, he'd earned it
Yes.
because he'd provided a good service during the war, and of course he was much too old to do anything positive.
Right.
He had a nephew from France, Mr. Meissner, who he had about 2 or 3 factories up in Cleator Moor. It
Right.
wasn't just the one, and I used to sit and listen to having terrible rows in French. My French wasn't good enough. It used to be quite entertaining. But he was a wonderful man. I learnt an awful lot from him. And I worked for him,
Right.
but he gave me my head, if you know what I mean. Let
Really?
me do what I wanted to do.
Really?
And in fact, I mean, it was, just to show you the extent of it, after the war, when I came back to England, I'm sorry, you know, I then stayed at my parents' house, and we had the top floor. When we came back from Norfolk, we had the middle floor, which was a much bigger. Promotion,
indeed.
definitely.
Did you have children by that stage?
Well, we had another child,
Right.
who was born in London when we came back from Norfolk.
Right.
But of course, I was very busy with this and sort of things we were doing. For instance, there was a lot of war surplus. People don't realise, but after the war,
Huge amount.
there was tanks and ships and equipment, everything you can imagine. And I got involved with this a bit, and I just remember, this is memories coming back.
Yeah.
I went over to Paris, and I flew from Croydon Airport, which shows you how long ago
Oh,
it was.
yes, that
Very
was
small plane, people
gateway.
can't remember what it
Yes,
was like.
yeah.
And I went to Paris, and I remember going to this vast mansion in Paris,
Oh, right.
and going up this huge staircase, and this French aristocrat coming down with his stick, and I was negotiating for warships.
To do what with?
Well, just sell them on for scrap.
Oh, right. What, the steel content? Yes,
Steel
the
content,
materials.
yeah.
Oh, right.
But of course, there were other things, countries who wanted them, and you would sell them on to. In fact, it's one of my wife's brother's memories.
Yes.
He remembers me going on the phone while I was at his house one day and saying, "Oh, I hear you've got a warship for sale."
Oh, right.
It's one of his memories.
So
But,
were they sort of sealed bids or what? Or
no, nothing like that. It was all
Really?
by entertaining,
Shaking
hands, and
Really?
oh, you've no idea. And there was an awful lot of fiddling going
Oh,
on,
huge
which was
amount.
terrible. I didn't get involved with that,
No.
but there was.
Yeah.
And well, you can understand it because we pulled out of Europe. There was troops being demobbed everywhere, and so much equipment had to be got rid of. It was an embarrassment almost.
Well, certainly I'm aware that in the profession I trained with the
Yes.
Air Force, that a huge amount of the electronic and radio equipment was actually dumped in Welsh mines and
Was
then
it really?
filled in,
Was it? It's
because
terrible
they
shame,
did,
yeah.
if they released it onto the
Yeah,
market,
yeah,
then
they
your
could.
manufacturers would stop.
Well, this
And that is a
this
problem
right,
with
yeah.
switching from a war economy
there
to a
was
civilian.
There was a vast number of people engaged in this.
Oh,
I
right.
remember one woman, this is memories coming
Yeah.
back, Mrs. Lax, and she was a very good German businesswoman. I don't know how she was involved
Quite,
in
no.
London, but she was busy on this sort of business.
Was she?
And she asked me one day, she said, I wonder if you'd come, Eric, along. She said, I've got some man, he communicates with a spirit, and the spirit's speaking a strange language.
Oh, right.
And I'd like to know what it is. You've got several Far Eastern languages. You might be able to identify it.
All
I
right.
used to speak Burmese, and
Mm.
so I went along there. This is one of my first experiences with this sort of thing. And he gabbled away, and I said, "Well, it's not Burmese or any that language I've ever heard." It was. I thought, well, he's a bit of a.
Yeah, a trial.
So, he went, and afterwards I said, "Do you pay him?" And no, I never give him a penny. I never give him a penny. So I know he's genuine because there's no money involved
Oh,
at all.
right.
As I was going out of the front door, I noticed 3 or 4 rather daubed canvases by the door. I said, "Oh, what are those?" She said, "He's an artist as well." She said, "He lets me have those at £100 each." I thought, so I've always had a slight suspicion since then.
It's not that hand, they're selling with that
Well,
hand.
that's right. But of course, Houdini spent the whole of his life
Yes.
trying to find a genuine spiritualist,
Yes.
and he never came across anybody that he couldn't replicate.
No.
But anyway, coming back to the story, of course, I was doing magic and
Right.
fire eating as well, and I got involved with a place in Dean Street called the Interval Club.
Oh, right.
Now, this was started by a lady, and she was blind, and her mother. And of course, in those days, people were swarming back into London to get into the media business.
Yes,
There was a new television
All the
starting up.
youngster
The
people
old
and
variety theatres were still
The
going
windmill
strong.
must have been going.
Oh, the windmill went all through the floor,
Yes,
of
it
course.
did. Magic.
But did you ever go?
No.
Oh, well,
I'm very pure and unsullied.
by today's eyes,
Oh,
it
it's
was
very pure.
Very pure. But
Yes.
in those days, they couldn't move.
But when you look
know.
at the comedians that came through there,
Well, that's right.
absolutely
Yeah,
phenomenal proving ground.
But
Brilliant.
coming back to the Interval Club, they had all these youngsters coming from all over the country down to London to get in. Well, of course, they had nowhere to stay, and they were being exploited.
Oh,
Girls
yes.
were being put on the.
Yes, but you
I
cried.
needn't tell
No.
you. But the Interval Club did a marvellous service in Dean Street. They had this huge premises next to the mosque. There was it a mosque? I think it was a mosque or a.
I don't know Dean Street. No.
Some
Yeah.
religious building,
Uh-huh.
and they had loads of bedrooms,
Oh, right.
and they let these youngsters have them all very cheaply, and they had a haven to go to, cheap food and what's. In fact, I
Oh,
became
right.
a director of the company that ran it,
Yes,
and I think it did a marvellous
yes,
job
it
of
did,
work.
yeah.
In fact, I've got
we could do with something like that
I've
now.
got £50 still in my bank account where I've got to put a memorial up to
You have
Molly,
told us,
Molly
yes.
Hewitt. I
Yes,
think
that's
that
right. You
comes
did
back
tell
to
us
me.
about
I
that,
think I
yes,
must have
you
told
did,
you
yeah.
about that.
Mm,
But anyway, this was an interesting period because did I mention the Hoxton Empire?
No.
Oh
is
well,
this-
the Hoxton Empire was a variety theatre,
Right.
and one of Sperrigan's enterprises was a wholesale children's wear business.
Oh, right.
And he needed some premises for it. So I said, I know just the place. So I went and I organised the purchase of this Hoxton Theatre.
Oh, really?
And of course it wasn't suitable for a warehouse because,
really,
I mean,
no.
it was still with the vast area and the balconies above.
And then it's
And
raked and staggered.
So
and,
what
yeah.
I did, I bought up a lot of cheap timber, and I ran timbers across from the stage to the balcony. So we created another floor.
Oh, I'm with you.
So
yes.
we had had 2 floors instead of just the one floor as we had
right.
before,
Yes.
and it was very, very successful.
Mm.
But the funny part about it was, I went years later.
Right.
And I thought I must pop in there and see that place. I was passing
Yes,
it,
see what it's
and I
like.
went in and asked them, and I went and looked, and of course I found when I went in that where we'd put that floor in like that, they had put 2 more above those, and they were all being supported by my cheap timbers underneath. So I hate
high
to
risk
think-
now.
High risk, but it just shows you how
So-
careful you have to be.
So obviously, building inspecting and health and safety in your
It wasn't-
early
it
days
wasn't-
was
non-existent,
snapping at your
non-existent.
heels.
No
Snapping.
planning permission. We didn't have to
No.
ask anybody. We
You just got on with
ahead
it.
and
Mind you,
did
it was a pretty desperate time, wasn't
But
it?
of course, it does illustrate the need
You've
for
got
these
to
things.
do it properly.
Because
To do it
if
properly.
those things had been there, that wouldn't have been possible.
No,
What
no.
we did.
It's a question of its interpretation, though, Eric,
Well,
isn't
this
it?
is
I mean,
right.
some interpretation is such that things just are stopped, stone dead, aren't they?
Well, this is quite right. But it was an interesting time because when we left Norfolk, you know, to come back to
Yes.
London, we were going to buy a house because we get quite established with this business we were doing.
This was in Norfolk.
This was in the Norfolk,
right.
and I put down a £50 deposit. I remember it was £600 for this nice
Yeah.
3-bedroom.
Would you like to
cottage.
mention that price again for our viewer?
£600 and £50 deposit on it,
Oh, well, that's
and-
that's 8%.
and so it was
A decent deposit.
A decent little deposit.
Yeah.
But of course, when we lost our baby, that of course gave us the reason for saying, well, you know, we're not going to stay in Norfolk. There's too
Shame.
many memories with that, and so we lost the deposit for the house, and we came back to London.
Right.
But it was a very interesting period, the London, because, for argument's sake, with the berries, Woolworths, of course, was going strong because they were one of the most popular shops.
Indeed they
then.
were.
They're defunct now, sad to say.
Well, you could buy glasses or teeth or
Well,
anything,
actually,
couldn't you, in
well,
those days?
Woolworths started off by being nothing over sixpence. And of course, people forget that because they remember the Woolworths as they
Yes.
were when they shut
Yeah.
down. But when Woolworths first started, there was nothing over sixpence, which
No.
is 2.5p. So
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
shows you, doesn't
Yeah.
it? And one of the interesting things was Mr. Woolworths, who started it, they asked him one day, how many sales girls did he have? He said, I haven't got a single sales girl.
All right.
This is when he had thousands of stores all over
Yeah.
America, all over England.
Yeah.
He said, I haven't got a single sales girl. He said, I only employ girls to take the money and wrap the goods.
Yeah.
And
And the goods sell themselves.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And the thing was, they used to sell a hammer for sixpence.
Yes.
And they used to put it at the back of the store, so everybody had to walk right
All
the
the
way
way
through the
through
store
to
to
get,
it.
yeah.
I remember my first camera cost me a shilling.
Did
And
it?
that was, you paid sixpence for the front of it and sixpence for the back of it. It was a lovely
Oh,
little
I
camera.
love the idea.
But it was very clever
Yes, it
how
is.
they did it.
Yeah.
And of course, Spriggan wanted to have berries in Woolworths. I mean, he
Right.
hadn't been successful.
This
in
is
doing
your Russian,
it.
rather
he was
eccentric
making the
entrepreneur.
berries. So
Yes.
of course I said, oh, don't worry, leave that to me.
Right.
And I went along to Woolworths, and I saw the buyer, and it's very interesting because I think things are very much different then
Yeah.
than they are now,
Apparently not.
aren't they? Oh,
No,
well,
Sainsbury's had a similar experience a year ago. But go on.
No, but the thing was, one of the ways I did it was by entertaining, taking him out. I used to take him out for lunch practically every week.
This was the buyer for
The
Woolworths.
buyer for Woolworths.
Oh, right.
And you've got to appreciate them because they got the hardest possible bargain.
Oh, yes.
Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah.
And they still expected all this on top
As
of it.
well
as
as.
well as.
Yes,
And,
yes.
But as I say, we used to take him out for lunch. And the interesting thing was, in an expensive West End restaurant, a lunch would cost as much as a wage for a single man working in the factory.
I'm sure it did.
And you've no
Yes.
idea. And I used
Yes.
to shower him with gifts.
Yeah.
And
This is when the expense account was an expense
it wasn't
account,
expensive.
where-
Used to
and-
take him out to the theatre. We used to go to the theatre regularly, and he became a very close friend. In fact,
Right.
he had a daughter.
Oh, yes.
I always remember her, and I used to take her out to lunch as well. With my wife knowing all about it, I
Yes.
might say.
This is Eric. Eric, lunch is on you. Yeah, I could imagine it.
Yes,
Yeah,
oh
I
yes,
can,
it was.
I can.
But
Yeah.
these things I hope have changed. I don't know.
In some regards.
But it was an interesting period, and Woolworths was giving a very good service.
Absolutely.
And of course, it was about that time, I think, or a bit later, that they started the supermarkets over in America and Canada.
Yes, yes.
They hadn't reached England yet,
No.
so that Woolworths was considered like one of the
Well, one of the leading edge Yes,
that-
shopping experiences.
That and Marks and Spencer's, of course.
Yes.
Marks and Spencer's was very good as well.
And they're still with us.
And they're still with us.
Whereas
but,
sadly Walrus
yes.
has gone.
But I remember going into this Marks and Spencer's buyer.
Oh yes.
I can't remember what I tried to sell him, but that was a different kettle of fish altogether.
I would
that
imagine
was.
tightly controlled,
That
fably
that
controlled.
was.
So,
but one of the first other things which was interesting, another reason I went over to Paris for it as well, I was always interested in new ideas.
yes,
And I don't know whether you remember the old metal press studs that
Yes.
were on all the clothes and
indeed,
everything.
yes.
I found a firm in France
Who's doing
that was
those?
producing them in nylon.
Oh yeah, brilliant idea.
And so, obviously, I tried to make arrangements for England, and I discovered that the main man who was selling the metal ones
Yes.
was a factory owner up in the Midlands somewhere.
Oh
He
right,
owned about 6 factories,
right.
and he was providing Woolworths with these little
Presto.
press studs.
Yes.
So we thought it would be better for him to do that than for me to do it directly with him.
Right.
So I said to him, well, we'll go over to Paris together. I made an agreement with him.
Oh right.
And just to show you how things were in those days, we went over to Paris, and there I was entertaining this factory owner in Paris, went to the Folies Bergère.
Oh,
and,
of course.
Marvellous
Yes,
time.
yes.
And what was interesting, perhaps I shouldn't tell you all of
No,
this.
of course
but,
you should.
But my wife knows all about
Oh,
it.
she does. She's told me.
And but we went out for a meal, and of course this man, he picked up 2 young girls.
As he would.
As he would,
And
yeah.
that had to go on expenses.
Oh, went on expenses.
Oh, right.
It wasn't me who was paying
No.
the expenses. He was paying the
Oh,
expenses.
right, right.
Because he wanted the business.
Of course.
So, of course, we went and we had a superb meal in this restaurant.
Mm.
They made a soufflé Grand Marnier. I don't know whether you know what a soufflé Grand
no,
Marnier.
but I like the
This-
Grand Marnier,
this-
regardless
this-
of what it's on.
This Paris restaurant,
Mm.
unbelievable. It was brought out, it was a great dish like this, and a soufflé, you know,
Or really risen.
raises.
Yes.
And I've never tasted the like from that
Since,
day to this.
have you not?
But then afterwards, of course, this man, he'd arranged for us to go over to a hotel.
Yes, of
So
course.
there was he and I
Yeah.
and these 2 girls.
Right.
When we got to the foyer of
But
the
yeah.
hotel, I realised I didn't know
You-
what was
you were-
going on.
you were on to
that
perform as well?
I was asked to go up to the bedroom
Yes.
with one girl, and he was going up to the bedroom with another.
You didn't want to share them.
And I said, oh,
No.
I'm not doing that.
I'm British.
So,
I'm British.
so maybe people
He
would
had
think I
both.
was naive. So he took both of
Of course
them
he would. Of course he would.
That he was a nice man.
Was this the Midland man or the Frenchman? Was this the...
This was the man up the Midland.
Ah,
the Midland
right.
man.
Oh, well,
the
he
man
was...
who was a factory
when in
owner.
Paris, when in Paris.
Well, he
Yeah.
did. But you see, when I went, this was so unfair about it. When I got home, I
Yes.
told my wife all about it. She
She-
got so cross
Oh,
with
she
me.
wa- yeah.
She threw cushions at me. She was so angry.
How
And I
dare
said,
you
"Well,
get in this
I
position?"
I didn't do anything. She
Fool.
still was cross
No,
with me.
being in
But,
position.
But it was an interesting
Oh, it
period.
is.
It's very
Yeah,
interesting
it is.
life.
The important thing is, did he get the agency for the UK?
We did do it. We imported them.
So,
the first ones came in.
and then did he then reach for the rest of the world? Because I mean, it's a wonderful opening.
Well, he carried on.
Brilliant,
He carried on
absolutely
with
brilliant
it, but it,
product.
But it was an amazing period
Opportunities.
because thinking back on it, I was involved with the building process, which
Mm.
nobody's ever done anything with, and it was called the Rousseau process. And I
Right.
found this because somehow or other I used to go around with ideas and follow things out.
And you do, and you go to exhibitions, you see
Well, we didn't
phenomenal
have so
things.
many exhibitions in
Did
those
you
days.
not?
No,
No.
they
No.
didn't have them in those days.
Most of the
Uh,
good things are already gone by the time you get there.
But this Rousseau process, they had concrete blocks,
Right.
precision made, absolutely dead square, and they had little bits cut out of them, so you could lay down a row of these without any mortar. You'd lay a row of these blocks down,
Right.
then you put the little pegs in, so to speak, and then they lay the next
Oh, and they
on
lock.
top, and they locked in. So you
Ah.
had the whole wall. You could build a wall in next to no time.
But no mortar used at all.
No mortar used at all. But,
So
but
why did it
nothing ever
catch
came
on?
to. Well, they were starting with a lot of new ideas.
Yes.
So at that time, for instance, there was people who were dissatisfied with the tiles on roofs,
Yes, yes.
and so they were producing what looked like a sheet of tile.